thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. We'll get started. So I guess we'll just start out with a couple of introductory questions. First of all, my name is Clint Terrell. I'm a PhD candidate in the English department. I met Jerry. We met each other online. We kind of became acquainted online. Yep. We follow some of the same kind of political pages.
Similar political line stuff. Yeah.
And we got to talking one day, and I found out that you were actually involved in the hunger strikes and the agreement and hostilities that went down in Pelican Bay. For those that don't know about it, there was a massive hunger strike in California prisons in 2013, protesting long-term solitary confinement. And arbitrary gang validation process where people were getting validated as gang members and being placed in solitary confinement indefinitely. We had people in solitary confinement for 10, 20, 30 years with no due process, we started talking. I found out that you were part of that. I was also involved with it, but on the streets, though. I wasn't in prison at the time. At the time, I was incarcerated, but not at that time, right? And I was involved with some student organizations and stuff. And so when I found out that you were in this documentary, that you've been involved in some acting roles around Chicano culture and formerly incarcerated, politics and movement stuff. I was like, man, we got to get this guy to campus.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I guess we started out by asking, like, how did you get involved with the film? How did you meet Brandon? What got you in?
So I have to go a little backstory first, but so formerly incarcerated, I came, basically my case was incarcerated 2011, so I came in during the end of the hunger strikes. Already kind of politically aware a little bit, not too much. I think I would say more at that time before I went to prison. I was more, I would say, fall under kind of cultural nationalist. I knew what Chicano was. I knew where that came from. But anyways, before I go off topic, fell into acting while incarcerated after my life sentence got reversed. Seen one of my homeboys, rest in peace, he was doing it, and kind of thought that was interesting. Came home, picked it up. The mentor, the guy that kind of mentored me while I was in there, he knew my homie, rest in peace, and kind of mentored me a little bit more when I came home. But landed the first couple auditions, started messing with the casting agency from the streets to the set, and going to a little film festival with them is when I met Brandon. So we're at the Panamanian Film Festival, kind of seen him sitting by himself, and I'm like, man, I want everybody to feel comfortable at this event. So started chopping it up with him, and he told me he was working on this film, and I was like, man, well, that's actually something that I'm really been into my whole life, is Chicano studies, Chicano activism, anything that kind of revolves around in that realm, you know what I mean?
Oh, cool, yeah. And you said you got a life sentence reverse. That wasn't part of my question, but that's a whole story that needs to be told, man.
So 2011, basically I was charged with, attempted murder, discharging a firearm. I'm gonna put all that out here. I feel like I have to say everything that was involved with it. But one of the mitigating factors in this case, which I to this day firmly believe that it was a self-defense case, but because of the neighborhood I grew up in, the background, my family, friends, it turned into a big old gang thing. And it was, I had been a part of that at one point, but at this point in time, like I said, it was a simple neighborly dispute that turned into something else. But because of our system and the way they used the validation process, the gang injunction process, it was, they focused more on that than anything. So ended up going to trial, lost, and ended up being sentenced to 32 years to life. And got to prison, and like I said, I never really tried to think about the fact that I was serving life. I think I tried to just not think about it, and when I would cross my mind, I would just try to justify it by the way I grew up. Like, oh, okay, this is what I signed up for, and I would put it in the back of my mind. But I think while in prison, during the hunger strikes and all that kicking off, got to participate towards the end and got to see the results of it, of not a lot of people that know, or the public norm wouldn't know, but there's been a lot of racial division in there for decades, with the whites, the Chicanos from up north, the Chicanos from down south, the new African-American card. But when I got to go in there, besides having my own Chicano, my own Chicano beliefs and wanting everybody to kind of get along, seeing it firsthand of everybody come together, something that hadn't been done in decades, and seeing every race come together, every ethnicity come together for something that was bigger than what was going on in there for the benefit of them. I think that kind of opened my eyes up a little bit more.
Yeah, Oh, yeah. Right on. So, all right, so we'll get into some questions about the film now. The first question that I had was originally I had it in mind for Brandon, but he wasn't able to make it today.
Yeah.
But it was about the title of the film. So, I mean, this film, we get a real big historicity, right? We get it's a real kind of almost a Chicano kind of genealogy here,
Yeah,
right?
yep,
We get starting with the Zoot Suits, Vietnam, Pachuco culture. There was even some mention about Chicano culture in Japan. Like, we kind of get it all in there, right? Like, any one of these time periods, any one of these areas could really be kind of almost its own documentary, right? So we get this real big history. But my question was about the title of the American Homeboy and American Homeboy, right? And what is it about what do you think about this particular film telling the homeboy, and this particular telling of the Chicano story, right?
I think he did a good job with that. As far as, you know, you do have a lot of Chicano books. You do have a lot of Chicano documentaries, Chicano films. I think him incorporating those that have untold stories like myself, that was his way of incorporating that and getting everybody from every not only every group, every class, but the homeboy's perspective too on the Chicano movement. I think they are synonymous with each other, American Homeboy. But it is a Chicano documentary, a Chicano film. You know what I mean?
Right, for sure. My second question then, it brings me to I guess a question about like who is Chicano, right? What it means to be Chicano. And there was a few different kind of definitions and understandings of that was iterated throughout the film. On one hand, you had Chuco Moreno in there. You know, if you don't know if you're Chicano or not, then you're probably not, right? There was. And then there was and then you said in your point in the film, the one part where one of your scenes where you said you grew up with the word Chicano, the term Chicano in your household, right? It comes from your dad. It was a term that you grew up identifying with. And then we had the Central American homie on there, which I liked. I thought that was cool. Like, you know, he didn't grow up with the term Chicano, but he still identifies as Chicano. We had the couple comments, you know, Luis Rodriguez and the couple other guys talking about how they had black homeboys and they had white homeboys. They had homeboys from different that weren't necessarily Chicano, but they identified as Chicano and they were accepted as Chicano. They embraced the lifestyle. They lived the lifestyle. They embraced the culture. I was just kind of wondering what your take on that is. You know.
So even myself, my definition of Chicano is you know, they didn't make it in the film, but it's a little bit different. I firmly believe that Chicano is a nationality. You know, what defines a nation or what a nationality is a common culture, common language, economic, geographic location, and a psychological makeup. I have to say all that because, again, same thing how some of the individuals said in there, you know, same thing in my neighborhood. I grew up with Armenian homies, Gabacho homies, Chino homies, but I never not once stopped and said, hey, you're not my homeboy because you don't look like me. But we all grew up the same. We all grew up speaking the same cholo, the same calo. We wore the same clothes. Same thing and kind of incorporated in prison too. It's same thing. Like, these are my brothers. These are homeboys. I never again, because you have blue eyes, blonde hair, but you speak better Spanish than me, you're not my homeboy. They embrace the Chicano culture. They grew up with me, and that's what I consider a Chicano homeboy.
Right. All right, so I'm gonna complicate that a little bit more now. There was another point where Chicano, one of the subjects made the point about Chicano was about embracing indigeneity, right? Rejecting European identity, embracing this kind of this indigenous identity, right? And so I guess my question about that then is on one hand, it is that, right? But then how does that negotiate with people who are not necessarily of Latin American descent, not necessarily of Mexican descendant? How does that indigeneity work? And then how does that claim to how does one negotiate indigeneity? Because that is a real thing. That is a real threat in there. Without infringing and
on those who
treading on who on actual, documented actual tribal groups whose whole survival and livelihood is wrapped up in, treaties and, you know what I mean, official policy with the United States government and whatnot, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. Because even like I myself, like I said, before my incarceration, like I said, I kind of fell under that cultural nationalism. I just wanted to embrace, minus European identity. I wanted to bring back traditions as far as traditional sweat lodge, learning how to speak Nahuatloli. And I thought that was part of embracing my Chicano culture. And like I said, I don't think when I went to prison, that kind of changed. It kind of changed and became more of a revolutionary or socialist perspective when I seen everybody come together, because it was more like, okay, learning Nahuatl didn't get me home. Doing sweat lodge didn't get me home. I understood that learning litigation is what was going to get me home. And at that time, so that's what worked for me then. Now that I've come home, and again, I kind of feel like they both go hand in hand together, the indigenous side and the political side. So as far as having individuals, like I said, I think if you grew up in that and you grew up around that, then you have to embrace, not that you have to, but you're going to embrace that. You're going to love that too, and that just comes with it. I was talking with a friend earlier today and asked her what was her opinion on that too, because she's more embracing that aspect too. So I think they do go hand in hand. You have to have, as far as infringing on those who have laws and tribal laws set up and stuff like that too, I think that's where we're going. The direction we need to go is getting the cultural nationalists on one side and the political activists on one side, and coming to the table and saying, okay, what direction do we need to go? What, you mean?
Right, cool. We'll follow that up in a couple of questions. The next question, switching gears a little bit here, moving from Chicano identity. I was interested in this. This question was originally supposed to be for Brandon, but the perspective of law enforcement in the film, right? We have the one guy, he starts out, he says he started out working at a youth organization, and he was kind of a liberal. He was a Chicano. He identified, he identifies as Chicano, but he didn't like the kind of the gangster aspect of it, right? He was turned off by that, but he still kind of saw himself as a Chicano. And I mean, I'm also from part of the, part of the Mexican-American family on my mom's side, Scots-Irish on my dad's side, Mexican on my mom's side, although they don't even say Chicano. They barely even admit they're Mexican, right? I grew up, they were telling me I was Spanish, which is kind of funny, because even if we trace back our European ancestry, it's more French and German than it is Spanish, right? But we would say, oh, we're Spanish, right? And everybody speaks Spanish. That's why we speak Spanish, So the Chicano would never be admitted to. And I got law enforcement in my family. My uncle's a retired helicopter pilot for the Fresno Police Department. We don't have much of a relationship, but I'm just curious about that. Like, where does Chicano identity start and the homeboy, or Chicano identity and the homeboy identity start? How do we negotiate that relationship with law enforcement if they're identifying in Chicano? What's our relationship, especially considering the history of violence that Chicanos have experienced at the hands of law enforcement, right?
Yeah, see, that's another one. That's another broad topic that, kind of like how I answered with the last question, is, and I want to say an individual, when they filmed this from the archives footage, kind of said the same thing. You're going to have bad apples and good apples in every category. You know what I mean? And same as you, I have family that's in law enforcement, and same thing. They grew up in the same Chicano neighborhood I did, and I'll use the example of two family members. One, I would say kind of falls into a class category. One assimilated, went to the military, got out, moved into a better neighborhood, and kind of lost his Chicano identity. Now, the other family member, same thing, is still, assimilated somewhat, and I say that in class-wise, but still being in law enforcement, still does what he can do for the Chicano community. Right. So now the media, same thing with our people, the media portrays us as only two-dimensional beings when we're a lot more than that. We're actors, we're professors, we have the ability to do that. And that's why I'm kind of jumped into acting, because I want to control that narrative, tell those stories. But same thing, I think doing stuff like this, how we're doing right now here, same thing like my family member. And I think, having individuals like that, having them come to the table to bridge that gap would be a start, because right now where we're at, we need to either police our own communities or allow the media to disrupt us. I mean, it's a hard one, because me and you have both been in the same place and have dealt firsthand with the negative stuff that goes on in there. You mean?
Right. Yeah, I guess it's a complicated thing. What I was thinking too, do we consider this guy that's out there right here? Is he mystified? You know what I mean? Does he have agency? Like, how do we negotiate that? But yeah, I think you answered that well.
You know what I mean? It's a broad topic. I think it's something that, again, if even within our community, you have it's good apples and it's bad apples. But I think our material access to production, to education, to healthcare, if that were better, then we could have, it would be we'd have to be able to conduct a better conversation, you know what I mean? Or have people from those communities police our communities because they know, they grew up in those same communities. They have the ability to like, okay, identify, you know what I mean?
Right.
Identify with.
Sure. All right, so the next question, kind of getting back to what you were talking about too, and this idea of a nationality, right, being a nationality.
Yeah.
There was a point, one of the subjects in the documentary made the point about how Chicano culture, and just the Chicano identity, and particularly homeboy culture, but just the identity of Chicano, right, is actually a minority. You know, it's actually a minority of people that are Latin American descendant, Mexican descendant, that really identify and embrace this identity, right? And so I guess my question is, what is it about Chicanismo, the Chicano identity, that is fundamentally political? And is this Chicano identity, is it an identity with a unique political struggle? Is it kind of a unique political struggle within Latinidad, within the kind of a Latinidad identity that is something kind of unique and specific? And is it then, as you were saying, it is kind of it is a national identity in the way that it's a specific culture, a specific language, right? A specific identity. But then it's also is it an identity that that can be chosen, right? It's an identity that someone can choose to identify as a political statement, regardless, right?
Yeah. Again, I mean that's where it stems from. I mean, besides going back to the indigenous roots of it, Mexica, and then fast forward, it became a derogative term, a shortened derogative term, Chicano. But I think it became a stronghold during the civil rights era. It became a slogan. It was, Chicano power. That's when it picked up its political power. You know what I mean? As far as the slogan itself, or the name itself. Just like a lot of organizations during the 60s and 70s, during the civil rights era, they were dismantled. Is it as strong as it was? I think it kind of is making it come back through social media, through stuff like that, a lot of stuff that was played in the documentary took place during the 20s, the 30s, and I feel like it's kind of repeating itself right now. I mean, I think we aired this perfect timing with everything going on. You had the Operation Wetback back in the day. Excuse my language, but that's what it was called. And I feel like those are our neighbors, or those are our neighbors, and we need to instill back again the good neighbor policy. I mean, we need more allies than anything. And same thing, I think, with everything going on with the immigration reform and all the migrants and all that stuff. I think half of those are our relatives. They're our family members. I got my coworkers that still visit their family over there. So it's sorry for going off topic a little bit, but it's something that needs to be addressed, and I think this is the perfect time to address it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No. I'm gonna build. You kind of already answered, but I'm gonna ask this question anyways. Building on this idea of the Chicano identity as a political identity, right? There was one professor towards the end of the film where he almost makes a statement that he says that this idea of national liberation and self-determination is what Chicano used to be about. And he said now it's just an aesthetic, right? And I'm wondering if you could I mean, I kind of already got your position on, but if you could maybe address that again. Like, do you think that the Chicanismo has been reduced to the level of an aesthetic at our contemporary moment? Is there still avenues for self-determination as a political identity and as a political interest group?
I can only say that for our group, and I think there is room for that, but I think like anything changes over time. It was more powerful during that era. So I think now, having gone through prison and seeing the solidarity with the European group, with the new African American group, with all the different ethnicities, my position is more it's a class struggle, I think, that's going on right now. You know what I mean? So I think that the Chicanismo would get a lot of people back on board. I think we do need to redevelop our political line and what angle we need to go, but also realize like we have allies even within this room. I mean, everybody who's been within confines in prison, I think seeing the reality of it, that it's not a racial thing, it's a class thing, it's a class struggle. You know?
Right. Sure, yeah. All right, switching gears a little bit now on kind of a different topic. My next question was about the point that was made about, I forget which actor, which subject it was that made the point about I think it was the Honduran homie actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yo.
Where he makes the point that within Chicano culture is the only culture in which youth strive to go to prison. They see prison as a destination, not wanting to go to a university or Harvard, wanting to go to Pelican Bay. That's where they're going to learn everything that we need to know. And I'm wondering if that was that your truth. And even as somebody like I was in prison, I didn't write Chicano in prison, even though I have that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I ended up.
Yeah.
Because of circumstances, ended up getting kind of corralled in with the white boys when I was in prison, But even then, I was still, even myself saw prison, as a place to kind of make a name for myself in that world. And I'm wondering if you think if that if that was your truth as well. Two, do you think that that's still as true for this generation as it was for our generation? Do you think that younger homies are kind of more hip to the bullshit than we were, or is it an allure that's still as vibrant and attractive as ever?
I think it's still a hit and miss. Okay, so was it my truth? I would kind of disagree with Gil a little bit. I mean, I don't think I had my older homeboys or family members that encouraged me. I don't think I ever woke up one day and said, hey, you know what, I think I want to go to prison. That was never a thing. Same thing with joining the gang. I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to join the gang. It's just, I think it was a generational thing. Family members, homeboys. I didn't look at them as gang members. I looked at them as homeboys. And I try to even stray away from that, from the label gang members. But fast forwarding to today, is it still glorified and is it still glamorized? I think it is. It's just, I wish it was glorified and glamorized in a way to where I can show the youth the positive that can be done in there. Not to encourage them to go there, but to, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth and tell a youngster, hey, don't do what I did when I did that, when they still have to go back to their neighborhood and still deal with whatever they have to deal with. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
no, that's good. That's a perfect segue in my last two questions here. So the next question I want to ask is about the point that you made in the documentary about self-rehabilitation and kind of having to take self-rehabilitation into your own hands because the prison doesn't provide avenues. So even though that's the official name of the California Department of Corrections and quote unquote rehabilitation, but I also know, just I know more about your story than everybody else here does, and then what was portrayed in the film, that politicization and becoming politicized in prison was part of your rehabilitation. And if you could just say something about why did you start gravitating towards politics specifically, and how did that change of political consciousness inform your own quote unquote rehabilitation?
I think, like I said, once I got to solitary confinement, kind of bouncing off the last question too. I did, not that it was glorified and glamorized, but it was spoken about like, oh, you make it to solitary confinement, that's graduating. You're big time now. And, hearing the stories too when you're young of the older homies, like, oh, the culture's still alive back there. We try to keep it alive, speaking now, learning our old traditions. But having got back there and kind of was dumbfounded by, like, no, it was the opposite. You had a lot of homies in there that were going to college, getting degrees, learning different languages that they can actually use on the outs. But I think that's what kind of hit me, because I was kind of already wanting to go that route, but having seen the OGs, like, no, we need to, like I said earlier, learning now didn't get me home. Learning litigation did. So I think that's where I started straying more towards, okay, how can I develop the correct political line to still using that to reel some of the homies in, but also using today's tools to get where we need to get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That lawsuit that the OGs won, the Todd Ashker versus the Brown, that was a big thing. You know what I mean? I don't know how publicized it was out here. I know they just came out with a documentary on PBS, but that was a big thing. That was a groundbreaking thing, and I feel like that's solidarity that America needs right now. You know what I mean? To see that those individuals who were criminalized come together to do something powerful, I think that's what we're lacking right now and missing.
Yeah, I will say, just to answer that question, I mean, for me, that was a story of the 21st century for me. You know what I mean? It was a very important story. Like it blew my mind. It really blew my mind. The first time somebody showed me the agreement to end hostilities, I thought it was a forgery. I was like, who wrote this? Like, I thought somebody like wrote this up in their like, you know what I mean? And my friend, no, man, this is like, they're gonna do this, and it really blew my mind. And I'm always surprised when I talk to people who are not aware of it, and I'm like, you don't know about the 2013 Pelican Bay hunger strikes? You know what I mean? That's is a very important story to me. But I think it is well known in a particular kind of circle out here, right? But yeah, no. Okay, so then that's good though. That brings me right into to my last question here. I I feel like a lot of times, you know what I mean, when we're talking, especially this term rehabilitation, a lot of people get the impression, and especially a lot of youngsters, right?
Yeah.
There's you know, especially in this kind of reentry, at-risk youth kind of thing, we get this impression that a lot of the people that are coming out that are speaking, talking about quote-unquote change or union lessons, that they were dropouts or that they were informants, or that in order to turn your life around, in order to get good, that you have to go out bad. You know what I mean? And that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are able to turn their lives around without doing that, without cooperating with the law enforcement, without ruining their name, without ruining their reputation. And I would say, if you would say a couple things about that. One, you know, how is that navigated? You mean how is that navigated? For me, I was kind of a mess up to the end. And I didn't start getting my life together until I got out the last time. You know what I mean? So I didn't do that. But I'd like to see, how do you go about that process of you know what I mean, having that change while you're still incarcerated, how you navigate that terrain while going through that kind of political psychological transformation. And then also, I'm just curious, like, what is the attitude from the older homies in there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is the attitude different within Chicano culture in prison and other race groups from what you know or what you were able to see? Is it similar? Yeah, if you could kind of touch on that, all those questions, kind of.
So again, that was my rehabilitation, was learning, you know, the revolutionary theory, studying the revolutionary theory, developing my political consciousness. Now, was that for everybody? I couldn't say. You know what I mean? But that was one thing. Once I got out of solitary confinement, and I would practice revolutionary theory, and which is basically, if this doesn't work, okay, let me try to roll the homies in with this, and let me try this avenue. Basically, learning different things for the individuals, because again, some of the rehabilitation that they attempt to provide in there, it may work for some of the individuals, but I think it's not for the mass that are in there. You know what I mean? You still have to come home, you still have to find work, you still have to do a lot of that stuff. So I can't really say that it didn't work for me, because I didn't use that route. I used, you know, the route that I went. My bad. What was one of the other questions you had asked as far as
What is the attitude against that when, you know what I mean, when someone makes a decision that, you know what, I'm going to do something, I'm going to start doing something different, but I'm also not stepping away or turning my back on, you know what I mean, people that. You know,
Okay. So that's another good question. I think that's what kind of low-key towards the end of my term kind of kept me out of trouble a little bit too. So learning litigation, I think that's one thing that everybody had in common there, is they were fighting cases. They were fighting, you know, everybody wants to go home. They don't want to stay in there. So I think that was one thing that I got along with all the OGs from different ethnic cards, was because I knew the law, and that's all something that we had. That was our common ground. If I can help the homie with his you know, his case law that he got going on, or his motion, or you know, filing some kind of motion or anything like that, I think it wasn't a bad thing. I mean, it was okay. You're not only pressing issues for us, and because the agreement to end the hostilities, to me, that was a political revolutionary struggle. So the OGs I don't think they frowned upon it. It's once they came out and hit mainline, they were still pressing issues for us. You know, Gabriel Huerta, he helped. I want to say he helped also kick off the Underground Scholars Initiative on the inside, as well as at the local college that I was at in Kern Valley State Prison, getting books for us. The Bakersfield College, them having teachers come in and get stuff done like that for us legitimately. You know what I mean? So it's not frowned upon. But again, you have to weigh both the state's rehabilitation versus our own rehabilitation, and I weighed more with my own rehabilitation versus the state.
Right. Yeah, and for those that don't know, I know there's probably some underground scholars here. You know, the Underground Scholars Organization is a formerly incarcerated student organization. I think we have a chapter on every single UC campus now. We really started around the hunger strikes and the agreement to end hostilities that he's talking about. You know, it was a lot of formerly incarcerated students started coming out, getting involved in demonstrations, and we realized that there was a whole bunch of us, you know, and so we basically we formed a union, and we started a student organization. And so really, you know, Underground Scholars really would not be here today if it wasn't for the work that you guys were doing back there. So I appreciate you for coming out here, man, and doing this. And I know that you said that you were actually neighbor with Todd Ashker.
Yeah, he was in Carr Valley State Prison.
Todd
Yep.
Ashker was one of the ones that initiated
Cool individual, yep.
the federal lawsuit against the state of California for long-term solitary confinement.
Yeah.
And then you said that you wrote Barrios Unidos, and I also worked with Barrios Unidos. That was one of the first kind of organizations that I got involved with when I got out of prison.
Yeah, that was the first organization I ever started writing with, and then I don't know if they had sent me a pamphlet. Yeah, I think that's what it was them that sent me a pamphlet that had other organizations on there. So that's when I started. I came across MIM Prisons, Maoist Internationalist Ministries of Prisons, and kind of that's what really helped me develop my political consciousness, was corresponding with them. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, and then if you guys notice, the film opens up with the scene talking to some girls, some homegirls from Barrios Unidos, right? Which I believe started in the city of Fresno and kind of took off in the Bay Area. Now it's kind of, I think it may be a nationwide thing. I know they got a Barrios Unidos on the East Coast somewhere.
Oh, wow.
In San Diego, there's a couple different headquarters, but yeah, it was something that started there in Northern California.
Central
Valley, Santa Cruz. That's where I worked. I was working with Santa Cruz Barrios Unidos, is where I was working with. Anyway, it's great, man. Thanks for coming out. Glad to have you. Great discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Emily for question and answers now.
All right, this one may be more for Jerry.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of different ideological trajectories,
Yeah.
cultural nationalism, and the Maoist international movement. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about your view on some of what is framed as abolitionist movements in the universities and different other movements that challenge the carceral apparatus, like, Unión del Barrio, Barrios Unidos. But Unión del Barrio is one of those other groups as well. They have the Chicano and Chicano Prison Project, which is explicitly Marxist. So could you weigh in a little bit on the range of ideologies that undergird these so-called abolition movements?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are, even by myself, studying, socialism, Marxism, upon coming home, I kind of cherry pick a little bit from both, and I've come to the conclusion that, with social, ¿cómo se dice? Revolutionary theory, socialist theory, is applying science basically, but to our material reality, right? Our access to production, our access to healthcare, our access to education, and or lack of any of that, right? I feel like a lot of abolitionist group, sorry, tongue-tied right now. Abolitionist groups, yeah, there you go, sorry. That's the calo in me. A lot of them are more Band-Aids, putting Band-Aids, as far as with the prison system, more putting Band-Aids on temporary fixes. So I think like the homies that were in the chute, in solitary confinement, it finally got to a point of where we were up against the wall, and it's like, okay, we have no choice but to do something. We don't have nothing to lose but our chains. You know what I mean? So weighing our material reality, same thing with the outs, everything going on out here, I think it's a little bit different. I think as a people, we're not really up against the wall, so we have all these different opinions on what direction we should go. So I think the socialist theory of applying different methods, there's multiple methods. It's not just multiple methods. It's not just the left, the right. There's multiple ideas that can be brought to the table, and that's where I'm at right now, is bringing everybody from the left to right and springing more ideas than just, does this work and this work? We're not going to be able to figure this out unless we test these theories out. You know what I mean? But sorry if I go off a little bit on that, but yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for educating us, especially me, but I want to go way back. I had a brother who was taken to a place called the Narcotics Farm in Fort Worth, Texas, and they were treating him he was a tecato, and they were treating him to get rid of his addiction, and he ended up dying there, and they were attempting to treat his addiction with shock treatments and other forms of medication, and he died. But that story it's been really hard for me to reach out to people and discuss that. I don't think that history is pretty foggy, But this goes back to 1952 when he died there, and he was only 22 years old, and he spent a lot of time in different youth authority and prison and so forth. and my older brother, his second brother also, but that story is yet to be told. It's called the Narcotics Farm in Fort Worth, Texas. And it first opened up in Lexington, Kentucky, and then they opened another one. It's still there. I'm not sure what they're doing now, but they were using these guys basically as guinea pigs to try to rid them of this addiction. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know if I can get a card or if anybody's interested in getting into this. I'd like to get in contact with somebody about this. There was a lady who just wrote a book about this particular facility. I don't have her name at hand. I've been in touch with her by email, and a book came out, I think, in November. I haven't really read it yet. And there was another person who wrote something about this as well. So it's a topic that's risen recently with these two people, but it was a real injustice. Some of the guys in the community that we grew up in, which is in Boyle Heights, also went there, and there were actors that went there, and it was just. But in their case, the guys that came from the Chicanos that came from the areas that we grew up in, they seem to have been used in this way. So I just want to put that out there.
No, that's good. Those are stories that need to be told. I mean, a lot of them. I think that's where I'm at right now, and within the acting realm is I've been doing it for 3 years now, and the majority of the roles that I've been taking on, like I said, they're are only depicted as two-dimensional characters. Either I'm the cholo or the gangster, or the farm worker, or, you know what I mean, when we're capable of so much more. But I think that's why I want to take the next step as far as getting into the writing aspect, getting into the directing aspect, getting into the producing aspect, to show not only that we can do that with our background, but to tell those stories that need to be told. I mean, there's a lot, even me and Clint were talking backstage, that there's so many stories that need to be told that create solidarity, you know what I mean? And that's one of them, you know what I mean?
Hi, I was wondering, I think I may have an idea of where you personally stand, but I was wondering if you could speak historically for the Chicano community, for Cholo Pachoco and all that. Do you think the cultural ties were more based on the experience of underclass solidarity or ethnicity and racial, that type of thing? Because they were discussed both in the film, in terms of like these types of connections, these experiences of alienation, and they both go hand in hand. The politics that you've been talking about that got you out of the prison system and that Marxist type of thing tend to lean towards the underclass experience, right?
Yes,
But
correct.
more broadly in the Chicano community, do you think the ties that bind are more based on ethnicity or the relationship to money and class?
That's a good question. A lot of questions in one, but so, okay, do they tie into class? I think class is the main thing. Class is the big perspective as far as, so Chicano community back in the when it became a big thing in the civil rights era, it was more a class thing. It was more of a class struggle. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist today, but here on the outside in this country, we've lost that identity of what are we struggling for? You know, with everything going on with the immigration reform right now, migrants going on right now, I think Chicano in itself is a separate identity from Mexico and not completely assimilated within America either, you know what I mean? But going back to what we were kind of asking though, do I feel that it's, sorry about that, one more time?
So like, do you think the ties that bind like
Yeah.
the Chicano community historically
Yeah.
lean more towards the underclass experience
Oh, yeah.
or the ethnic, cultural, racial experience of being
Well,
an immigrant?
yeah, so that's another thing too. So like the homie from Honduras that's in the film, he probably came here at a young age, and so his ethnicity, his nationality would have been Honduras. But same thing like a lot of my homies from my neighborhood, they came here at a young age. A lot of their first languages were Armenian. I have a Chino homie who speaks Filipino, you know what I mean? But growing up in the neighborhood with me, he embraced it. And again, I never looked at him like, yeah, he was the Asian homie, but I never looked at him like he wasn't Chicano. We listened to the same Chicano music, we were into the lowrider scene, we were into the same Chicano culture, but yeah, it is of an underprivileged class. I do believe that's what it is. But you do have, like I said, I have a family member who's assimilated into a higher upper class, higher standard of living, and still identifies with that. So, again, I think it's just where we're at is trying to bridge that gap to figure out where we're at and where we need to go. You know what I mean? But
Thank you all for coming out.
yeah.